Today, we're going to be doing a recap of round 6 of the FIDE Candidates 2024. Before we look at the decisive games, good day for Team India, by the way, we're going to be taking a look at the standings. We have Gukesh and Nepo tied for first with 4 points. We have Fabi and Prague tied for second at 3.5. And then we have a couple people with 3, such as Nakamura and Vidit. And we have Abasiv and Ali Reza struggling with 1.5. And struggle they did today. So I'm not going to say who I want to win and who I think is going to win. That is in my predictions video. Today, we're going to start out looking at the games. Have you ever seen a Super GM with a losing position in 13 moves in a classical game? Recently, I have not until today. So, yes, good day for Team India. Vidit and Prague pulled out the dubs. Everybody else drew. And in this game, we get a Sicilian. So, Ali Reza, great player, struggling in this tournament. We get knight f3, cd4. We get an open Sicilian, right? Open Sicilian meaning knight f3, playing for d4. We also have a closed Sicilian playing for f4, like the Grand Prix attack. Knight takes d4, knight f6. There are 10 million different lines, so I'm not going to get into the theory. e6. Ali Reza is playing in like a cagey way, right? He has a pawn on e6 and d6, kind of like a hippo, but arguably better than hippo because open c-file. Maybe like a French queen on b6. We shall see. So many ways this could go. Bishop f4, we can assume white is looking to castle queenside. And here Ali Reza plays queen d8, which is actually not a good move. In this KG type of structure with the pawns on e6 and d6, we're going to break principle. You know how people say doubled pawns are bad? Chess is always position specific. So always answer, well, it depends. So knight e5 is the best move in this position. It's also the only move I've ever seen. Point is, after bishop takes, pawn takes, black controls d4, he controls f4, he controls d5, and he controls f5. That's a lot of key squares. So at the cost of doubled pawns, you know, risk reward, it would be good. These are good doubled pawns. Open d-file, he can counter castling queenside with the rook. He has an open dark squared bishop. He has a bad light squared bishop, but you can't win them all. These are good doubled squares, or good doubled pawns. They control good squares. Instead, we get queen d8. A weird retreating move. I don't know what he was thinking. And this game is going to be a great example of tempo and what happens when you fall behind too many tempo, right? In the end game, you fall behind one tempo, it changes the result of the game. In the opening, you're like, well, that's unfortunate. I just lost a tempo. But if you lose tempi, bad things happen, as we will see. a6, a common move, stopping anything from coming to b5, maybe trying to go b5 themselves and put the bishop on b7, with the extended fianchetto. We get a3, b5, extended fianchetto, and the bishop retreats back to e2. Now, we get castles queenside, and as you could see, black does not have his queen out. He is not castled, and his bishop is not out. I would say that's 3 tempo. White's rooks are connected. He is castled. He hasn't gone king b1 yet, but he doesn't need to go king b1 yet because black is lacking in development. So, 3 tempo. You kind of want to be making moves now. You don't want to let your opponent catch up and then have it be a game. You want to stop it from becoming a game before it becomes a game. So we get g4. That's exactly what that move does. Looks scary with this diagonal, but the point is you are threatening to go g5, kicking the knight, and then there are all sort of sacrifices and blowing open of the center and everything in the center of the board, which is scary. And now we get a crazy move by Ali Reza. I don't know how in this position he did not consolidate with rook d8, maybe h6 slowing down g5, maybe knight a5 going for some c-file action, knight c4, knight b3, some counterplay. Instead, he grabbed the pawn. So, a rule in chess, do not get greedy. Pretty sure that is a deadly sin too. So, do not do that. He is lost on move 13 now. That is not good. We now get pawn to e5, and you might be like, okay, why is he gambiting? Well, point is, if pawn takes pawn, we get bishop to e3, and this queen is basically just locked out of the game. Right before I said these were good doubled pawns, but now these are not such key squares, and this queen is out of the game. It needs to run somewhere to like h4. You can even kick it with bishop g5. And now when the queen comes back, you can go knight e4. And you might say, hey, why are you giving up material? And I'm not. Queen d7, mate in 1. So black's position is hanging on by a thread. He cannot take the pawn on e5, so he retreats the other knight back to d7. Now, Vidit spent a lot of time this game, but luckily it's such a non-complex position, or basically it's one of those games where everything is winning, so you don't really need a lot of time on the clock. He's spending time on the clock in the middle game to figure out the intricacies, but even if he ran under 10 minutes, for example, let's say, he'd have spent all that time, so he would understand the position and know how to play it pretty quickly. We get ed6. This bishop can never develop, so he can probably not castle kingside. That's what that means. Queen b6. This queen has traveled all across the board. Bishop to e3. Again, queen stays traveling. Now rook hf1. This is very scary. Black is super underdeveloped. I mean, it's crazy. It's move 17, and it looks like it's move 5 for black. That is not good. Knight c5, and we get a centralization of the queen. And luckily, Vidit did not miss a win this game. I know he's had some results where he's had trouble converting this tournament, but no. Queen a7 hits the bishop. If the bishop moves, you win a pawn. So now he's up a pawn. Now, bishop a7. Okay, so he had to calculate this the whole way through. Reason is, it's very scary to get your bishop pinned in front of your queen. Bishop cannot retreat. The queen cannot retreat without losing the bishop. So he's in a little bit of a bind, but luckily he calculated it all out. We get bishop takes b5. Now, if the bishop were to take, we would get knight takes, protecting the bishop on a7 and threatening knight c7 check. We do get a check, and now black can castle. Finally, it's move 22. So you'd imagine you'd be able to castle by now. Knight takes, and again, we're threatening the fork. We're defending the bishop. Now, pretty much black has to castle to get out of any tactical losses or piece losses. Still knight c7, and Alireza now is just trying to create complications. As you can see, it's move 25, so Vidit has 13 minutes to make 15 moves. It's a lot of moves, not a lot of time. But again, this is an easy position. So knight takes rook, and it looks scary for a second. Queen takes a8. This was probably Alireza's last hope. Reason is, he's threatening to go bishop e3, tying down the bishop. That would win a piece. He's also threatening to go knight e3, winning back in exchange. And then you would have a 4-on-1 against a 4-on-0 on the queen side. Have you ever seen that? I've never seen this type of pawn structure. A big majority on either end of the board. But queen e2 hits the knight, lets go of the bishop, but also unpins the queen from the bishop. So now if the knight moves, the bishop can move, and you're still up all that material. Instead, the queen takes the bishop, so of course the queen takes the knight, and then the bishop retreats. Still kind of a scary position. All the pawns on the queen side are open to exposing white's king, but these are 2700s, so he's probably not going to fall into like a mate in 2. Queen c4, aiming to go queen c7, and he does. Queen b5. If Alireza trades queens, that's GG's. You can play that with 10 seconds on the clock. So queen's guarding the knight, not allowing the queen trade, and now a nice rook lift by white. Just making all of his pieces working. He can double up on any file. He's guarding a4 to push the pawn. The rook centralized is a good piece. Now he doubles up on the d file. It's just this knight that's standing from preventing the pawn from queening. So once you get rid of that knight, you can probably make a queen. He's going for a queen trade, simplifying the position because he's low on time. 5 minutes, but he only needs to make 5 moves now. That's a lot of time for a little bit of moves. So the tables have turned. He sacks the exchange back because that is a queen. That is not a pawn. So was it really a sacrifice? Barely. Alireza resigns here because knight c6. The rook is trapped on d8. The pawn is won from queening. So the pawn will become a queen. So yeah, I don't know if Alireza messed up his prep or if he hasn't played this line in the Sicilian. Just got in his own head. Was like, that's a pawn. I don't know what queen d8 was, but I'm sure he had his plans. They just didn't go as planned. Now, we have Prague versus Abasov. This was a crazy game. Prague has been, you know, when a teacher keeps out the answer key to a test on the table and then the class somehow gets a hold of it in university and has all the answers. That's basically what Prague's been doing this tournament with his prep. Nepo was able to dodge his prep bomb yesterday, and it was a draw. But I don't know. He's just playing all these computer lines that these players have just not seen before, and that's crazy because all they do is look at computer lines. I don't know how he does it. So we get a Queen's Gambit, a Tarrasch, a declines. There's millions of ways to play this. We get an early capture on d4, and then c5. This is a rarer move. You're taught not to lock the position in because they could play b6, but this is different because the pawn is on a6. So usually when the pawn is on a7, black wants to go b6 here, and then they get the open a file, and the bishop could develop. Not so much here because the pawn on a6 is actually stagnating both the pieces that would take advantage of the positional malfunction of white's overextension, basically, with c5. Hope that made sense. b6 takes. We still get it because it is a common theme. But now b4. White has this bind on c5, and probably well within their prep. Neither player spending that much time. Move 11. They both have not even spent 10 minutes. So white has a bind on c5. Maybe you can rotate the knight over from a4 to c5. And we're going to get a knights versus bishop this game. You know, everybody says bishops are better than knights. That's been proving wrong a lot lately, even in open positions. Knight e4, knight a4. You do not want to trade the knights when you have an outpost on c5. Why is this an outpost? Well, because he has no b pawn and his d pawn is overextended. So if no pawn can kick a piece out from a square, that is an outpost. Knight c5, a great outpost. So you don't want to trade knights. We got bishop e2 just developing, both sides castle, and bishop e3 completing development once again. He now brings his knight to c5, and that is a great knight. It looks like black could take it because if white takes with the d pawn, that loses an exchange, but white also has a b pawn. Now you control the b file and b6. You have a big attack going on. Black's pieces are kind of cramped, and that'll be a central theme of this game. Queen d2 gaining a tempo on the knight, and here we are starting to get the piece complex, bishop pair versus knight pair. We're halfway there. Rook a b1 because the queen is on the b file, so now the rook is on the b file, and you do have a pawn side majority. So yes, black has a pawn side majority on the king side. This applies more to endgames, which I know people don't like, but a pawn side majority on the side of the board where the kings are matters less than a pawn side majority on the side of the board where the kings are not. Meaning a 2-on-1 where the kings are not is way stronger than a quick math 5-on-4 where the kings are. Because the king is the best piece in the endgame, so it's a great defender. That's just long-term thinking. Prague's queen side is better than Nijat's or Abbasov's king side because of where the kings are. Okay, so Abbasov was kind of suffering in this position because his bishops have nowhere to go, his queen has nowhere to go, and his rooks have nowhere to go. That's a lot of pieces that don't know where to go. So when you don't know what to do, blow open the position. Change the dynamic of the pawn structure. It'll throw your opponent off if your opponent is not Prague. And then you can get some fighting chances. So we get these hanging pawns in the center until it is taken. So we got pawn takes, bishop takes. That is a battery aiming at h2, but we have the knight guarding h2. It's a very weird position. It's a very weird position. I've never seen anything like this. d4, a clearance sacrifice. And here, there was chances to take this pawn, but there was a lot of complications, right? It's hard to be like, okay, bishop takes d4, knight d4, knight d4, bishop h2, king h1, and evaluate this. Because both the bishops are staring at your king, which has no pawn in front of it. But this bishop literally cannot move. How crazy is that? Literally, this bishop cannot move. And then, so all the pieces are trapped on the 8th rank and nothing could get connected. So there are a lot of tactics here for the knight. This is an example of an open board where the knights are thriving. But I could understand not wanting to go into that because chess doesn't make sense. That's why it's hard to get into. Bishop to g5 is a good try. It's trying to provoke the f pawn to move up. That is gross. There could be smothers mate in the future. There could be a lot of problems. Of course, Nijat does not play f6. He goes bishop back to d6. He does not hang a bishop in one move. So these people are pretty good. Now we get g4. Prague is lashing out. He has not been playing to draw. He's been playing to win this whole tournament. I respect it. g4, a great move, hitting the knight. And again, this bishop just cannot move. It looks like black's pieces are very coordinated, yet they're hitting nothing in reality, as long as you're careful, which he is. And really, so we're really just playing a position where white has rooks and black does not have rooks. In my opinion, that's what's going on. h6, we get queen e4, giving up the bishop for the knight, and now we get the complex. Knight pair versus bishop pair on a pretty open board, on a very open board, actually. It's crazy. These bishops are not good. His positional understanding has to be extremely good to understand that the knights are better than the bishops in this position. Because if you go by principle of the old days, everybody would take black's position. But chess is not so. Black finds a very good move, rook a7. Only move to keep the game in the balance, trying to bring it to e7 and activate it that way. His rooks aren't getting out on the 8th, but maybe they can get in on the 7th. We got rook takes d4. The rooks can now double up, and g4. g4 is a very ambitious try. However, he had to play rook e7, activating his pieces. I don't know what he didn't like in this position. Maybe he was like, oh, I was thinking of tactics that I cannot do. But bishop f4, and your pieces are starting to come to life. It's just a matter of time until this bishop comes out or is traded off for a knight. Your rooks could double up, and black has some good chances in this. However, he goes pawn to g4, and I'm not so sure what he missed. We got knight g5 by Prague again. I really wish he could have converted yesterday's game. Also, my bad for not having a recap. It wasn't such a decisive day, and I wasn't really paying attention to the games because I was busy. Fun facts. But knight to g5. There could be a mate here on h7, right, with like a clearance sacrifice, though they would go g6, but it's an idea. We got bishop takes h2. A pawn has been sacked. A bishop cannot come to b7, so that is good. Queen to e5. Black is offering up a queen trade. This bishop doesn't have anywhere to go, so a tense position. We get rook d5, and Prague trades on his own turn, bringing his knights towards the center, towards the queen side where he has more of the advantage on, and now black needs to waste a tempo, getting his bishop to safety. So both these games have come down to tempo, it seems. f6, a very good move. This could create a mating box. Maybe we could get a mate on the h file. Could create a losing position if they take, blasting open the king. Now bishop to f4. So many losses of tempo. White doubles up the rooks. It's like all of white's moves make sense in both these games. Black is just wasting a bunch of time, and then he just gets steamrolled. But I guess that's what happens. 2 rooks and 2 knights in the center of the board. Have you seen that before? Not often. g5, those are gross pawns. They are doubled. Some people might say those are connected future past pawns, but they're far from it. Prague elects to start simplifying the position right now. They are in time trouble, 4 minutes and 6 minutes to make 3 moves respectively. And look at what he does in this equal endgame. I'm saying equal because you have a pawn side majority on the queen side. These are gross pawns. The pawn side on the majority on the king side does not matter because the kings are there. Good knight, bad bishop, bad king, fine king, good pawns. Pawn that won't be there for that long. Rook to a8, trying to win the a pawn. Now, black had to sit on this position. He needed activity. Endgames always come down to activity. He needed to be as active as possible, try to go g3. These pawns are going to go fast, and then he would have chances. Under time pressure, though, that is very difficult. You want to get the pawn out of the way to free up space for your king. So very, very logical. But now the rook is trapped, right? You cannot trade rooks because where are these doubled pawns going? Nowhere. Where are these pawns going? They're going to become a queen. So he goes rook f5 trying to avoid a queen trade, but now we get knight d7 instantly. Prague reaches time control. Abasov does not, but it's too little too late. This knight can come to f6. There will be a discovered check on the king. This rook is trapped. These pawns will move. These pawns will not move. That is the theme of the position. And now rook f5. He, instead of creating space for his rook to move, like moving the dark squared bishop, he moves his king, reaching time control, but too little too late. Rook f5, this rook is trapped. So Prague successfully forces a trading of the rooks on his terms. He gets the pawn to a4. Very instructive. That saves the tempo. Everything is tempo. And this knight covers b8, and this pawn covers e3. So it is impossible for this bishop to ever get eyes on a7. So it is impossible for this bishop to stop the pawn from promoting. And the pawn just runs. We do get bishop... Actually, no. Abbasov resigned here. We would get bishop e3 in this position, but then knight c5, cutting off the diagonal, so the pawn successfully gets to a7. This pawn cannot go anywhere. And this is instructive. Never take pawns when you're guarding their promotion square, because in essence, all that does is waste a tempo. What do we not want to waste? Tempo. So don't take it. Push forward, make progress in your position, and good things will happen. So a good day for Team India. I'm rooting for Prague. I still think Fabi's going to win. Not going to change my predictions based on the current standings. Who does that? Should not change your opinions based on current standings. But we will see who wins. Thank you guys for watching. See you guys next time.